Thank you, Madam Speaker. Tonight I urge the adoption of my amendment, which would allow the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration to continue its congressionally mandated ongoing work to improve safety and accountability in the trucking and bus industry. I do so out of a concern that we need to exhibit common sense in what we do. We need to be fiscally prudent. We need to promote safe highways in our nation, and we need to recognize the importance of promoting personal responsibility and accountability. My amendment would strike a section of this bill that would halt the FMCSA's work toward issuing a rule that would make our highways safer for everyone by creating an incentive for motor carriers to make safety a greater priority. We have to allow the FMCSA to proceed with the development of a rule to increase insurance minimums for motor carriers, which have not been updated in fully 35 years in this nation and thus have become outdated to the point of uselessness. It is simply common sense, is the first point I make, that we adjust for inflation. Not adjusting for inflation for 35 years is not prudent, and it makes no sense. And it allows carriers to travel on our nation's highways in a financially irresponsible manner, in a manner that would allow them not to be accountable for whatever harm they might cause. Adjusting for inflation is common sense. It's also fiscally prudent because what happens? Right now in this nation, tractor trailers are allowed to travel around with $750,000 of liability insurance. The FMCSA is studying that number to see what it should be updated to after 35 years. $750,000 is not enough money. Just this morning in my district in northeastern Pennsylvania, there was a horrendous truck and bus accident in which 3 people were killed and a dozen others were seriously injured. When 3 people are killed, asking their families to share $750,000 is not fiscally responsible. And look who pays the difference. The people who pay the difference, if somebody's killed or if somebody is rendered, for example, a paraplegic, they're going to incur incredible amounts of medical bills. They're not going to be able to work. Who picks up the difference when that happens? It's the Social Security system. It's the Medicare system. It's John Q. taxpayer that ends up paying the bill when the trucking company doesn't have enough insurance to pay the damages. And so that's why it is fiscally prudent that we allow the FMCSA to continue its important work, and its important work that was mandated by the MAP 21 bill that required the FMCSA to do this work. It also promotes safe highways because if we raise insurance minimums up to modern and responsible levels, that means insurance companies will have to engage in actual real underwriting. They'll have to go out from the home office and visit the headquarters of trucking companies to make sure they're acting properly and safely and responsibly. If they do that, if you want to buy insurance at reasonable levels, you have to act safely. And finally, Madam Speaker, this is about personal responsibility. If you don't have enough insurance, you get away without being personally responsible when these horrendous crashes happen. And at this point, Madam Speaker, I reserve my time, but I yield to Mr. Price.
The gentleman from North Carolina is recognized.
I thank the gentleman for yielding, and I want to commend him for offering this amendment. This, as he has stressed very effectively, this is simply irrational to freeze these claims where they were in the early 80s, and it also defies our own body's directions to the DOT to look at this and to think about what kind of future changes might be in order. This simply preempts that whole process. Is that right?
That's correct. And for that very reason, I urge everyone to support my amendment, the FMCSA to finish its important work of examining and developing a rule that is critical to preventing devastating trucking accidents and keeping our highways safe and secure for everyone. Thank you, and I yield the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Iowa yields the balance of his time. Balance of his time. For what purpose does the gentleman from Iowa seek recognition? The gentleman is recognized.
I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I rise to oppose this amendment. As is frequently the case in Washington, D.C., the proposed rules requiring truckers to increase their liability insurance is a solution in search of a problem. The provision currently included in the bill must remain. It must remain because it protects job creators so they can stay in business. When you consider that 99.9% of crashes are already covered by existing insurance requirements, you can see that increasing insurance and thus costs at the expense of jobs is just not a credible solution. Safety is important. We all know that. And we all want to make sure that our roadways are safe, but the Department of Transportation readily admits that raising the cost does not necessarily improve safety. The DOT's own study expresses a crippling revelation to proponents of a cost increase on our job creators. There may be more effective ways that reduce crashes at a lower cost. Bottom line, we need to strike a balance. If the proposed regulations went into effect, our smaller trucking companies in Iowa and other rural areas and states and around the country would be unable to absorb the increased costs, and it could threaten their ability to stay in business. Too frequently in this town, we are working to fix the mistakes that were made by so-called Washington solutions. I strongly encourage the rejection of this amendment tonight. Madam Speaker.
Thank you.
Gentleman from Pennsylvania is recognized.
On the one point, Madam Speaker, about 99% of crashes settling within existing insurance minimums, there we have the opponents of my amendment speaking really out of both sides of their mouths, because if they say 99%, if they say it's so rare that a crash will cost more than the minimum insurance, then what that means is that the expense of insuring against that minimal risk has to be minimal itself. But these are the same people saying there will be a crippling additional insurance premium.
Thank you, sir.
It doesn't make sense.
I reclaim my time. I yield the balance of my time to the gentleman from Pennsylvania, Mr. Perry.
The gentleman from Pennsylvania is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I, too, oppose this amendment, Madam Chair. Increase in insurance requirements will not improve highway safety. I mean, what incentive does it create? How does increasing the insurance requirement improve safety? It's not backed by any sound data. The agency's own data shows that current requirements cover damages in more than 99% of all crashes. Think about that, more than 99% of all crashes. But to the gentleman's point, my friend from Pennsylvania, the agency is planning on tying these requirements to medical inflation, and the results in increases of 500% or more. Think about that. Medical inflation, this administration, I mean, isn't that the height of irony? I thought they were driving the cost of medical inflation down. That's another whole story. The fact is, industry has a remarkable safety record compared to all commercial motor vehicles. As a matter of fact, motor coaches average only 20 fatalities per year, and school buses only 5. Now, it's not meant to minimize those losses, because every life is precious. But in a highway environment that produces 35,000 fatalities per year, the DOT study did not even consider data, claims data, or talk to insurance carriers about the impacts of increasing insurance or whether there is even a need for it. Indeed, this is a solution that is looking for a problem that does not exist. I urge the members to vote no on this amendment. I yield back.
The gentleman from Iowa is recognized.
I urge my colleagues to oppose this amendment, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back the balance of his time. The question is on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Pennsylvania. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the noes have it. The amendment is not agreed to.
I ask for a recorded vote, Madam Speaker.
Pursuant to Clause 6 of Rule 18, further proceedings on the amendment will be offered by the gentleman from Pennsylvania will be postponed.